My first real date ended in the warm September air, on the steps of an old movie theater that smelled of caramel popcorn and freshly painted shop windows. The neon sign above the box office flickered like the letter E, making the word summer look like light, and for some reason that seemed like an important detail to me, as if that missing letter contained everything I didn't have. We were standing close, but not too close. Ilya kept his distance, as if he was quietly asking, "May I?" Although out loud he said something else. "I think it's time for us to decide." He smiled, frowning as attentive people do. "We, that is, are we dating?" I swallowed. My throat was dry from talking. The whole evening we jumped from the museum collection to his story about running in the morning, and my strange talent for telling stories about ancient tablets in such a way that baristas freeze, without adding milk. Everything was okay with him. He didn't interrupt, he listened, asked questions, laughed not loudly, but somehow in a whisper. And he had a good smell. Tart, not intrusive. But inside me there always lived another force, bashfully stubborn, nameless, which for some reason shuddered at the words, "we're dating," like a horse from the crack of a whip somewhere far away. I almost didn't, I began, catching my voice on the unevenness. I almost didn't date before. I don't know what the end game of all this is. I'm comfortable, I'm interested, but can we take it slow? Explore, see what happens. If it doesn't work out, we'll stay friends. He nodded as if I had suggested a perfectly reasonable route, not the highway, but a quiet path along the river. "Slow is just my thing," he smiled. "No sprints." I exhaled, my lungs rustled, and suddenly, barely having said this slowly, I heard myself. "Can I try kissing?" The words flew out so casually, as if I had trained them, although I had not trained them at all. Ilya did not twitch, not playfully, not with a theatrical pause. He simply appeared half a step closer. "Of course," he said, and repeated with his eyes, "Of course." We leaned slightly. No scene from a movie where the camera is circling and a violin is playing in the background. Just, my lips touch his lips like the surface of a warm mug, even, smooth, without currents and sparks. Neutral, I thought. Strange, nothing at all. And immediately felt ashamed of this thought, as if it could be read. We pulled back some 5 centimeters, enough to see faces again. Ilya smiled again, calmly, without checking the result. "Thanks for the evening," he said. "You're great. Let's really take it slow." "Go ahead," I replied. It was as if a voice had been found under my tongue. We parted at the metro, having arranged in farewell that very adult clarity. "We'll write tomorrow." I walked along the shop windows, reflecting myself, jacket, hair, bag, and felt something similar to the sound of an unzipping zipper. First, a slight shudder of joy. Well, I tried it, I'm alive, the world is in place. And then, a strange pulling feeling in the pit of my stomach, as if a bucket of water had been hung in my stomach. I swayed a little. I attributed it to hunger, to the air, to the fact that I had been talking for 2 hours straight. But in the carriage, when the doors closed, another switch suddenly clicked inside. Thinking about "let's meet" turned out to be like looking down from a bridge, standing on old boards. Familiar images came to life in my head, and they made me feel cold. A relationship is when you rent out part of your freedom. It's when someone needs to write when you want to be silent. When the weekend becomes ours, not yours. When your whim is now a bargaining chip. Someone nearby laughed at the meme, and the laughter was evil, although probably not. I held onto the handrail, and for some reason, I heard my pulse in my palm, as if the blood was flowing into the metal. By the time I got home, I was already feeling sick, not like from the smell of alcohol or bad spicy noodles, but like from a wave of anxiety that rolled through me, the kind that first tickles the back of my head, then gets under my skin and squeezes out saliva. I stood at the sink and thought, it can't be that it was just from a kiss. He was normal. He smelled good. He didn't. I heard the whistle of the kettle, and this sound brought me back to reality better than any psychologist. I turned off the stove, poured water, brought a mug, and couldn't drink because my throat was living a separate life. I sat down on a stool by the window, The yard was one of those where someone is always walking with a dog, and the dog always turns around at every sound. I looked at the black glass of the window and saw myself in it, pale, attentive, like a schoolgirl before a dictation. Oddly enough, it was then that the thought popped into my head. What if I'm just not talking about this? The word asexuality was resurrected not from memes or from conversations on the internet. I read some text a long time ago, probably on a friend's page. There were other people's words about neutrality to intimacy, about how a kiss is like touching a sleeve. Then I didn't try it on myself. It was too simple, too straightforward. Now it suddenly began to fit, like a dress that unexpectedly fits perfectly. The phone blinked from Ilya. I'm home. Thank you and really, no rush, okay? If you want, there's a small antique market on Saturday, but only if you like it. No musts goodnight, I reread no shoulds 3 times. There was medicine in those words, a small white tablet that melted on the tongue. But the body stubbornly held its own wave, and every together was considered a demand. I remembered how at school, during the bottle, everyone expected that we should, and I hid behind a column in the hallway, pretending to look for a hairpin. I wrote to my friend Lara, kissed neutral nauseous, is this normal? The letters form the phrase, I am a defective toaster. Lara responded almost immediately, with a sticker of a cat holding a sign, normal is a spectrum, and then, you are not obliged to want anything and you are not obliged to explain to your body what to want. Was this a good person? Yes, I wrote, very. Then tell him exactly what you feel and see how he hears it. Hearing is also a quality. I was still sitting with the phone, like you sit with a letter that you can't burn. Another fear was growing in my head, a particularly sticky one, not about kissing but about giving up positions, as if every agreed meeting on Saturday cuts off a little piece of the forest where I'm used to walking alone. I suddenly felt cramped in my own kitchen. I got up, turned on the light in the room, checked if the book about the noise of ancient cities was in place, it was, and tried to take a deep breath. The air reached the middle of my chest and didn't go any further. You're just afraid of change, I told myself and chuckled. Of all the self-accusations, this is the most boring. I've always been afraid of change, even when it came to changing the brand of shampoo. But there it ended, with me buying the same tube for another 3 months. Here the stakes were different. I caught myself counting, how much time a week does dating take up? 4 hours? 8? 15? And how would my quiet evenings when I put on tea and read about the walls covered in cuneiform fit in there? The phone blinked again. This time, good-naturedly, Ilya sent a photo. A pocket flashlight and his hand drawing a circle on the wall. I miss you, but I'm not pushing goodnight, he added. I'm not pushing, I read, and for some reason felt that the pressure was inside me, that it was my expectations and other people's voices that were gathering in chorus. Well, when will it be serious? Don't drag it out. Don't be weird. I moved the curtain so as not to see my reflection and felt a new rush of saliva, the same one that precedes. I slowly walked into the bathroom, turned on the cold water and brought my palms to my face. The water smelled the same as it always did, a little iron, a little chalk. Okay, I said out loud. Okay, not dying from emotion is also a skill. I felt funny about my own dramatic nature, and then I felt offended because I was laughing at myself. I went back to the phone and typed, thank you for the evening, I felt calm and good, we can go to the market. But I'm honestly not sure that I have any desire for physical intimacy. I might not want kisses, hugs, and I need time to figure out who I am in this. My finger hovered over the send button. Too serious? Too soon? Or just in time? My internal editor did some editing right at the cursor. At that moment, a new message came in. Not from Lara, from Ilya. Can I ask a question that's on the verge of weird? I didn't feel anything special today either, and that's okay. Honesty is very important to me. There's a thought I want to tell you. 3 running dots hovered under the screen like drops about to fall. I slumped my shoulders, and inside me 2 forces, the wild horse and the stubborn editor, were simultaneously quiet, listening. What would he say next? And what would I do with it if my body had already chosen its wave? The dots were still running. I stared at them like they were the neon letter E that was missing from the word. 3 dots ran across the screen like rain on glass. Then the phrase flashed, "Can I ask a question that's on the verge of weird?" I didn't feel any fireworks today either, and that's okay. I'm generally a slow person. First of all, closeness in the head is important to me. I don't want to rush you. If you want, let's try to agree on the speed. I reread speed several times. The word stood there like a road sign that I had been missing the whole way. Can I call? I dialed and immediately became afraid that calling was too physical for my condition. He replied, "Yes." And a second later, the phone buzzed. I saw his name on the screen, pressed the green receiver, and his voice came into my kitchen. Warm, slightly hoarse, as if he had been laughing all evening or talking a lot in the audience. "Hi," he said. I, to be honest, I kept repeating to myself all evening, "Don't make this up," because a kiss is not an exam. And then I caught myself thinking that it's very important to me that there's no war inside you right now. It's more of a natural disaster, I admitted. Not physical, but I'm semantic. It's as if they're asking me, "Are you ready to give up the key to yourself?" And I start holding on to my pockets. He smiled into the phone. I heard it the way you hear a smile by the pause before the words. "I don't want keys. I want to be a person with whom you don't have to lock yourself in the door. Listen, can I tell you something personal?" A couple of years ago, I tried to get into big history. Very fast, very much. It was good, but the pace was not my thing. And I was so burned out that after that, it seems, I couldn't listen to music for half a year. Everything really starts in my head. And what you say about, maybe I'm not talking about physical intimacy, sounds honest. Let's not break this. Let's try to be honest. What do you mean fairly? We pause any touching at all. Just words and actions. We meet, walk, talk. If you want, you can come up with a stop word in case it gets too much, and we'll agree on a check-in. At the end of each meeting, say how we do, a scale from 1 to 10, and at any moment, no is no without explanation, and then we'll see where it grows. I was silent, holding on to the mug, which finally allowed me to drink. The throat opened, the water went inside. Inside, however, there was still a noise from anxiety, but it became like a distant construction site. You can hear it, but now you can live. The safe word should be pause, I said. And yes, check-in is fine. And can I say something scary? I think I'm maybe asexual, or somewhere close. I don't know how much of this applies to me, but when I try to imagine kissing and then more, my brain goes bah and turns away. "Thank you for telling me," he answered immediately without pause. And it's not scary. I'm not an expert on labels, but my intuition is that a label is a tool, not a cage. If the tool helps, we take it. If it starts to hurt, we throw it away, okay? I nodded, although he didn't see. "And yes," he added more cheerfully, "the antique market is still open on Saturday. There are some amazing postcards from the beginning of the century. We can look at other people's texts and not touch each other. Sounds like a perfect Saturday." "It's funny," I said, "but yes, ideal." After the call, the kitchen became bigger. Even the lamp above the table began to shine softer, although I didn't change anything. I opened my laptop and Googled the words asexuality, romantic orientation, gray spectrum jumped across the screen. I read other people's stories where people described a kiss as a touch on the sleeve and a hug as a polite fabric between us. A couple of times I got goosebumps, from recognition, not from delight. I especially remember the phrase, "I don't need to treat myself. I need to stop trying to play someone else's role." I wrote it down on a piece of paper and attached it to the refrigerator with a magnet. I attached 2 more points nearby. I don't owe anyone anything and tell in advance. At night, I dreamed that I was standing again at that movie theater with the flat letter E. I took a small plastic letter from my pocket and put it in place, but it didn't hold. It flew off like a button from a shirt. Ilya was standing nearby and holding Scotch tape in his hands, but he didn't come closer. "If you want, stick it yourself," he said, "or let's just leave it as is. The word is still legible." I woke up with a slight smile. This rarely happens to me. In the morning, I wrote to Lara. We came up with a stop word and a scale. We're going to the market. I'm reading about orientations, and for the first time, I don't feel like a freak. Lara sent a heart and then a voice message, in a whisper so as not to wake her husband. I'm proud of you, and the market is great. Just remember, it's not an exam. You're not a course on mastering relationships. You'll meet a person, you'll see how you feel with him. The day flowed as usual. Work, correspondence with colleagues, one conference call, where I caught myself explaining complex things for too long, as if the whole world had decided to hear me in the morning. And I had to take advantage of the chance. Towards evening, my mother wrote, Auntie is having tea on Sunday. Liuba will be with the baby. Will you come? And yet, will you bring anyone? The smiley stung more than I expected. I put the phone face down, as if that would make smileys cease to exist. On Saturday, the market greeted us with the smell of cinnamon and wet tarpaulin. People in colorful scarves walked along the rows. Sellers talked to each other as if arguing over change, but there was music in their voices. Ilya stood at the entrance in a green jacket and a funny knitted hat with a thread sticking out. I saw him and felt an alarm siren go off inside me. Touch! Zrinya, although he was standing 2 steps away. Hello, he said, putting his hands in his pockets. Good to see you. On the scale? 6, I answered honestly. Normal, but cautious. I'm at 5. I'm a little worried about messing up. We walked along the rows like school children on a field trip. Everything is interesting, but you keep to yourself. He stopped at tables where they sold enamel mugs with chipped edges and admired the rust as if it were a work of art. I was glued to the stall with postcards. Happy New Year 1912. Component placement untidy curls, someone else's Dear Mashenka, someone else's I'll be back soon. I found one in the shape of the letter E from an old man with bushy eyebrows who sold glass paperweights. Or rather, it was just a strange figure, but in my imagination, it immediately became a letter. I took it in my hands. Cool, heavy, beautifully refracted the light. The old man squinted. The girl, she's 100 years old, no less. Then we are the same age, I joked. Ilya smiled but did not intervene. He simply stood nearby, silently like a guardian of good boundaries. The crowd suddenly swayed. Someone brushed me with their shoulder. Someone laughed loudly, and at that moment, a cyclist squeezed between the rows, catching the edge of the tarpaulin. Everything started spinning, and Ilya, purely reflexively, touched my wrist, pulling me closer to him so that I wouldn't crash into the counter with dishes. His fingers were warm, like pancakes just removed from the frying pan. My wrist responded with a metallic taste in my mouth. Pause, I said almost in a whisper, but so that he heard. He immediately let go. Step back, hands back in pockets. His face is a mixture of horror and guilt, like a man who put a mug on someone else's book without a coaster. I'm sorry, he said. Reflex, I won't do it again. It's not about don't touch. I squeezed out, gasping for air. It's about my body being like electricity without a ground. It needs to learn. Okay, he nodded. Let's take a break. I'm nearby. Tell me if I sit down. We moved into the passage between the rows, where they were selling something else that was unclear. It smelled of honey and wet threads. I breathed, looking at the shoes, mine and his, and counted the breaths. On the 8th breath, it let go. The pulse became not a roar, but music from the neighboring tent, audible, but not about me. I'll buy this E, I said when I was able to smile. Let it sit with me as a reminder that not all letters have to be brightly lit for a word to be read. I agree, he said, and took out his wallet, but stopped. Can I at least haggle for the sake of aesthetics, without physical participation? He spoke to the old man in his gentle manner, and he dropped the price by 100 rubles, not out of greed, but out of respect for the ritual. We left with a small bundle. I held it with both hands like a baby, and it was strangely pleasant to hold not a person. While we were walking to the coffee, he suddenly slowed down. I want to tell you something, he said evenly, about myself. It's something I don't tell everyone, but if we're going to be honest, then we have to. It's not a horror story, just a fact, and it might change the way you see me. I felt a familiar wave rise up inside me, not nausea, but pure anticipation. He sat down on the edge of an empty bench under the awning, leaving a distance between us that would easily accommodate another letter. E. If you're not ready now, tell me, he added, and I'll tell you another time. And at that very moment, the phone in my pocket vibrated so loudly as if a tractor had moved into it. On the screen. Mom. I already knew what would be there. Tea at Auntie's on Sunday. Gerald, will you bring anyone? This time, I seemed to hear the smiley with my ears. I looked at Ilya. He was waiting. I looked at the bell. It was ringing, promising a normal scenario with warm sets and when already questions. I inhaled. I pressed the green phone, and in that split second I realized, now I have only two options, to lie or to tell the truth for the first time. And it is precisely this choice, and not kisses and markets, that will apparently determine who I am next. I pressed the green receiver and suddenly heard my own breathing very clearly, as if the microphone had picked up my voice, not my mother's. My daughter, sang Mom with her usual cheerful anxiety. On Sunday at Auntie's, Liuba and the baby will be having tea. Will you come? And maybe bring someone. Just to meet, nothing special. I looked at Ilya. He was sitting on a bench under a canopy, like in an illustration of the word waiting. Not a centimeter closer, not a centimeter further. A familiar wave rose inside me, not nausea, but a sticky fear. Now they will start to assemble me into a set. I chose the truth. I'll come alone, I said. And, Mom, I have something important to say. I'm at the beginning of the process. Trying to date, slowly, and I have no idea if this will have an endgame. Don't ask me to bring you, just to be sure, please. Pause. On the other end, there's the rustling of bags. Mom is always pouring something out. You're scaring me, she said quietly. What do you mean, no endgame? You're normal. You're just being careful. You'll meet your person and everything will be fine. Normal? Everything is fine. Words like soft balls that hit a target. It doesn't hurt, but the target is you. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe not. That's an option too. I'm not broken, Mom. It's just a spectrum. Spectrum? Mom raised her voice. Is this from the internet? Honey, don't make things up. We are all spectra until we are overcome by love. Well, come for tea. Liuba will be there. Ask her how she is after giving birth. You will be distracted from your thoughts. I'll come, I repeated. Just don't ask when already. Agreed. She sighed, as if about a person who had put on the wrong jacket in the rain. Okay, I love you. Me too, I said and switched off, feeling like a tight valve was being unscrewed in my chest. Not all the way, but air began to flow. Ilya sat and waited silently. I sat on the edge of the bench, keeping a distance of 1 E between us, and nodded. Thanks for waiting. Tell me your story. He cleared his throat, not because he had to, but because that's how words are organized. I'm demi-romantic, he said calmly, and most likely demisexual. I don't wear it like a flag, it just works for me. My feelings turn on after I have a network of connectedness in my head. While it's not there, kisses are like an allergy test for me. It shows nothing, and if you force this network to build quickly, it breaks. I tried to speed it up. It ended with me hating my own phone. And also, I get overloads from touch. Not always, but sometimes the body says, stop, and I hear it later than it should. That's why now I'm learning to ask. Always I listened and felt something inside me straighten its shoulders, as if someone had closed the window in a room where there had been a draft for a long time. And also, he added after a short pause, I might be leaving for a couple of months in the fall. There's an internship in the archive, which is the dream of my entire teacher. We've applied, and the chances are high. It's not right now, but I don't want it to be a surprise if it comes. The words, I'll leave, pierced me like a thin needle. It's strange. I'm afraid of too close, and at the same time, I'm afraid of too far. So it's not about the distance, but about the requirement to choose. Thank you for telling me, I said. I'm glad you have names. I don't have them yet. I'm feeling around, and yeah, let's make a deal. Normal, like adults. We, like school children, began to pronounce the points out loud, almost syllable by syllable, Not because we didn't understand, but because it was safer that way. Point one, he said. 0 touches for a month, not even a hello with your elbow. Can we handle it? We'll manage, I nodded. Point two, at the end of each meeting, an honest scale of how am I now from 1 to 10. If below 4, take a break for a week. Point three, he continued. No is no. Not we'll discuss it later, not let's try it. No is no. Point four, don't tell others without consent. I added, recalling my mother's internet spectrum. This is my body and my head. He smiled with the corner of his mouth. Point five, we leave the correspondence if it turns into why aren't you answering? We are adults. We have a life. Point six, I said uncertainly. If your internship happens, we won't make a tragedy of the century out of it, but we'll see how we both feel. Without contracts, wait and promise. Okay? Okay. He nodded and extended his hand as if to shake mine, but then he pulled it away, and we both laughed. It's funny how much meaning there can be in a movement that didn't happen. After the market, we took coffee out the window. 2 paper cups, 2 people, 1 letter apart. We talked about stupid things. He told me about a professor who is in love with notebook margins and considers them the great emptiness of manuscripts. About how a barista taught me to recognize milk by sound. We learned to be close without testing ourselves, for closeness every second, and from this learning I stopped feeling sick. Sunday tea at Auntie's was like a museum of traditions. Coffee from a set that shouldn't be, but can be, a meat fur coat, and questions that sound like toasts. Lyubachka glowed like a child. Auntie chirped what a good girl that she gave birth on time. Mom kept within the limits, but I saw that a siren was hiding in her gaze. At the table it immediately began. Well, said the aunt, what about our beauty? Any news? And she looked at me slyly. Yes, I said, and felt the I'll leave needle tickle my rib again. I'm learning to say no where I used to be ashamed, and I'm very proud of myself. Someone chuckled, either a cousin or the heir. Mom blinked. We're just worried, she said quietly, so you don't miss it. I don't miss anything, I replied. I choose. It's different. For a second, we could hear something clicking in the radiator in the room. Aunt quickly switched to a story about new diapers, and I applauded her for that. But after dessert, Mom pulled me into the kitchen to help with the dishes. I booked you an appointment with a good woman, she exhaled as if she had shot. Sexologist, psychologist, very tactful. Just talk, nothing special. An old wave rose up inside me with a taste of iron on my tongue. I leaned on the edge of the tabletop to keep from rocking. Mom, I said slowly, when you sign me up for someone, you're saying there's something wrong with you. That's how it is with me. I don't need normalization, I need respect. Can you love me without signing me up? She turned to the tap and turned on the water. Noise is a way not to hear. I'm afraid for you, she said into the water. You've always been vulnerable. I'm not glass, I replied. I'm a human being and I can choose, even if you don't like that choice. We stood there like in a bad movie. Words are hitting the noise of water. No one is convincing anyone. I turned off the tap, hugged my mother with my eyes. Yes, that happens too. And went out. It was damp outside. I walked and mentally repeated, not dying from emotion is also a skill. And it became easier not from the phrase but from a simple step. My legs knew what to do. I wrote to Ilya, I survived today, I'm 4, can I have a voice? Not now when it's convenient. He replied, you can. I'm proud of you, I'm in the archive now, I'll call later. If anything, pause is available for the world too. In the evening he called and I suddenly caught myself wanting to hear his voice. Not in the sense of I want him, but in the sense of his voice is like a lamp. I told him about the consultation without my consent, about being vulnerable, about the tap. He listened without saying, and I have, and in the end he said, you know, when I was a kid I had an emergency support button. That was when Dad would just sit next to me and be silent. I can give you that button too, if you want. I want to, I said, and I felt ashamed of the word as if I'd asked for too much. But not every day, I quickly added. I like silence. And I love you. He smiled into the phone. Let's meet on Tuesday? I have a plan. A bookstore that smells of printing ink and a display case with moon-shaped lamps. On Tuesday, the bookstore really did smell of paint, which made me itch with childhood memories. A library, wooden chairs, a librarian with glasses and a chain. We wandered between the shelves like people who know how to live without prefaces. At the checkout, a guy asked, "A package?" And Ilya automatically extended his hand, but then stopped and raised his palm as a sign of remembered. It was so touching, not because of the gesture, but because of the noticeable effort, that something inside me softly turned. Not desire, no, but warm gratitude, devoid of stickiness. We went outside and he suddenly said, "They wrote to me from that archive today, the probability is 90. If everything works out, I'll leave in 3 weeks. Not for 2 months, but for 3 I'll return by winter." That's good news, and it's difficult. I don't know what to do with the fact that I feel good with you, and leaving is also right. The world around me dimmed a little, as if someone had turned down the light one notch. I felt my stomach carefully trying to get used to the wave and took a deep breath. Not dying from emotion is also a skill. "Thank you for telling me in advance," I said. I guess it removes some expectations. We can see how we are in these 3 weeks, without future contracts. And then we'll be like us. Not as a couple, not as an almost couple. Like two people with letters that are sometimes missing, but the word is still readable. He nodded. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and laughed quietly. "You just said a phrase that needs to be embroidered on a pillow." "Very neat," I clarified. We agreed to continue our experiment, meetings without touching, check-ins, honesty, and the right to pause at any time. I walked home and caught surprised glances at the shop windows. For some reason, everything in them seemed a little surprised. Bread with a crispy crust, battery-powered lanterns, paper stars, and then my phone vibrated. "I confirm, we are waiting for you," they wrote from the archive. "You need to buy tickets before midnight. Departure date is in 21 days. Ilya sent me a screenshot with a heart and the words, "My hands are shaking scary and happy at the same time. If you feel comfortable, I want to invite you for the weekend to where I'm going before leaving." Not as a romantic, but as sharing my favorite place. Separate rooms, lots of air, water that makes the most beautiful bend in the city. I understand that this can be a lot. The answer is any, and not now. I stopped on the sidewalk. The world became a little higher and a little narrower again. The word invitation sounded like obligation in my body. Train a suitcase, foreign city, what if? My mouth became salty. I sat down on the nearest step and put my palms on my knees like anchors. "Pause," I wrote. He replied, "Here." And the empty message was like an open palm. I looked up. Right in front of me was a shop window with the moon-shaped lamps he had spoken of. One lamp flickered like the neon outside the movie theater that first night when the letter was missing. I took my glass E out of my bag, transferred it to my palms, cold with a real weight. If I go, it will be my choice, not a surrender of the keys, I told myself. If I don't go, it's also my choice, not a refusal of life. It would seem that I am an adult, but such simple equations come with difficulty. I got up and went home. The clock in the hallway on the wall was ticking. Big, insistent, like an ant asking, "Well?" 3 hours until midnight. I made some tea, sat down at the table, put E next to me, and opened my laptop. In the browser window, buy ticket and an empty square for a name. The mouse was shaking in my hand, like a tongue before yes. The phone blinked. "Mom, I know I went too far," she wrote. "I canceled the recording. I'm sorry. If you want, you can tell me. I just want to know that you're happy. And also, if you ever go, bring me a postcard from the city where the river makes a bend. I Googled it. It's beautiful." I smiled, suddenly without effort. Then, the laptop again. The buy button glows. 3 hours turned into 2.5, and at that very moment, a new message came from Ilya. "I'm not taking it yet. The rules are the same for both. Let's call each other at 9 and each of us will say out loud what we're afraid of." Honestly, if after that we both still want it, we'll take it. If not, that's also fine, I'm here. And I really don't want your body to escape from me. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. I looked at my reflection in the dark window and saw that for the first time in many days, there was no pale schoolgirl in front of the dictation in this reflection. There stood a woman who could choose. I put my fingers on the keyboard he'll call at 9, but for now I need to figure out how to use words to reach that place in my stomach where my waves form. And then I realized I left the worst thing for later. It's not the train, not the tickets, not my mother, and not the end game. The scariest thing is to tell him out loud what I always looked away from. Not, I might be asexual, but I might never want you. And see if he stays sitting on the same bench at the same distance of one letter. The hand on the clock moved to the 9 o'clock position. It hadn't arrived yet, but the question was already sitting at the table with me, quietly tapping his spoon against the edge of his mug. At 9, the phone rang like a bell, and from this ringing, the door in my chest swung open, not outward, but inward. I turned on the speakerphone, put the glass E next to me to keep my eyes on it, and said, "Let's not go into details, I'll start." "I'm listening," he answered. I could tell from his voice that he was sitting up straight as usual, and probably holding his palms on his knees so as not to click his pen. "My first fear," I began and swallowed the air, "is that I will never want you. Not in the sense of, I don't want it today, but never. That my may to physical intimacy is not a temporary setting, but a firmware. And you will waste your time, warmth, and patience on me, and be left empty-handed." He didn't interrupt. I heard him breathe in and out, one at a time. "The second," I continued, "is that we will take the forest from me. My evenings, my loneliness, the way I walk around the rooms and don't have to explain anything to anyone. I'm afraid for my territory." I wrote it down, he said. "Can I have mine?" I'm afraid of being a task for you," he said calmly, "a project to teach the body not to be afraid. I'm afraid that I'll be there and become an irritant, that every word I say will be like a doorbell at the most inopportune moment. I'm also afraid of leaving and returning to a stranger, not because you'll change, but because my network will have time to get out of the habit of your voice. And lastly, I'm afraid that everything good between us will turn into, we must keep this, and must doesn't work well in my head." We both fell silent. It seemed to me that the silence was also breathing. Then he added, "There is one more, small but important. I am afraid that the word we use to name what we have will become a cage for both of us. Therefore, I propose not to name it at all." I agree. I was surprised at how easily the word came out. And about never. You don't have to live next to never. If after some time it becomes unbearable, speak up. I can bear the truth. I don't want you to live in gratitude instead of joy. "We have a deal," he said. "Now about the tickets. I want you to go because I want to show you that very bending water, but I don't want you to go for my sake. So I have a suggestion. If after this conversation your scale is above 5, we buy. If it's below, we put it aside and mark it as a good decision, not cowardice." I looked at my inner ruler. It would be honest to say 5.5, but these halves drive my inner accountant crazy. I closed my eyes, remembered the bookstore, his outstretched hand at the checkout and how he removed it, and realized 6. Not from excitement, from calm. 6, I said. "I have 7, he answered. "But that's because my head is watery, and because you said never. It's more honest than all the we'll see. Should we take it?" "We'll take it," I exhaled. I entered the name in the field, as if I had signed an agreement with myself. Not the return of keys, but a temporary pass to someone else's embankment. He sent a smiley in the form of a paper airplane. I responded with a period, and I realized that this period was not the end, but the beginning of a new line. The morning of the trip was ridiculously ordinary. You fold your toothbrush, try to remember if you turned off the iron. Although you don't have an iron, check your tickets 5 times. He met me at the entrance to the station from afar, like you meet timid birds, with a bright smile, but without taking any steps. We agreed, everyone carries their own backpacks. The carriage smelled of bleach and tea from glasses with cup holders. For me, this smell always turns off the loud alarm. We found seats, sat down, he said. Hello. Hello, I replied. Scale? 5.5, he smiled. Let's count it as 6. Let it be 6, I agreed. We read He, a collection of letters from some geographer. I, funny notes about the noise of ancient cities. Sometimes we showed each other paragraphs without touching. We just brought the book closer. When the conductor offered tea, he squinted, remembering our zero touch, and reflexively did not touch my table, but moved it towards himself. How strange, this non-movement made me feel warm inside. The world knows how to be careful if you ask it to be so. The hotel he took me to turned out to be old, with high ceilings where the lamps wheezed when turned on, and corridors smelling of dust and brushes. 2 rooms, every other. His, 307, mine, 309. We even said, if anything, it's better to write than to knock. Funny and serious, the city was different, although it had the same cafes, trams, and snack bars. But the river, it's true, it made a beautiful curve, as if it was drawn by a stubborn calligrapher. We walked along the embankment at a distance of 1 letter between us and talked about the archive. He came to life when he said inventory books, inventory, tape, and at that moment I suddenly clearly understood why I felt calm with him. We both love it when meaning grows from details and not from expectations. Let's stand here, he suggested. The water likes to play here. We stopped. The wind touched my face, very lightly, not like people below. The waves beat against the concrete, and into this tone, someone else's laughter wedged itself. A group of students passed by. One of them, without looking, straightened the scarf, and its edge almost touched my shoulder. My body shuddered. I said, "Pause here," he answered immediately. "We breathe." We stood and breathed. There was something inexpressibly intimate in this standing, without closeness. Suddenly I caught someone's gaze on me. An elderly woman with a dog was looking at us and smiling. This gaze did not judge, it seemed to say, "You are great that you are standing the way you are comfortable." In the evening, he took me to a place he had been worried about all day. A park where crooked birch trees grow in a clearing and people hang ribbons on them, not for luck, but as a keepsake. The ribbons were faded, unnecessary, but honest because of that. We stood like 2 tourists and read other people's knots. Liza and faith in herself. Sasha is not afraid of the stage. Vanya got in. I suddenly imagined what my ribbon would look like. Probably simply, "I am a spectrum and this is not a disease." "Shall we tie him up?" he suggested, but didn't reach into his pocket. "Or is this not our practice?" "We'll see for now," I answered. "I have the letter enough." At the hotel, we wished each other good night, via text messages from neighboring doors. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, not from excitement, but from the unusual silence of another city. And I caught myself in a strange calm, as if an hourglass had been turned over inside me and the sand began to pour evenly. The next morning we went to look at the bridges. There was a moment when everything could have fallen apart. On the narrow stairs near the old tower, a man letting us pass nudged me with his elbow. I almost fell. Ilya instinctively reached out to support me, and an "oh" flashed in his eyes. An old siren flared up inside me, but this time it didn't howl at full power. Rather, it warned and died down. I managed to say, "Pause," and he froze in place, holding his hand in the air. We froze together, like 2 dots in a word, between which a dash is placed, and we moved on. Everything. During the day, we reached the very place where the river makes a bend. He stopped, took a small box out of his backpack, paper, speckled, and handed it to me from a distance. I don't know if it's possible to give it as a gift. If it's not possible, I'll keep it in my backpack until better times. "You can," I said. The voice surprised me by not flinching. Inside was a small notebook with an elastic band on the first page of which he had subtly written, "Not dying from emotion is also a skill." And below, "And also the right to your own speed." "I thought you'd be mad at me for quoting." He smiled guiltily. "But it seems to me that writing down is easier to carry." "It's beautiful," I said. "Thank you." We stood, looked at the water, and were silent. Then I turned to him, not with my body, but with my face, and said what I had been putting off. I may never develop a craving for you. It's not about you. It's about my brain, which, well, that's it. I don't know what form will take, and I don't want to promise I want to be with you in a way that's safe for me, and to be honest, when I can't anymore. He nodded slowly, like in a movie where the director asks to do it without theatrical. Thank you, he said quietly. I won't wait for another body from you. I'll listen to your words, and if it becomes unbearable for me, I'll say bye. I feel very good, even without touching. Perhaps precisely because without me too, I was surprised. We both smiled at our strangeness. And in that smile, there was so much respect for the fact that we were not correcting each other that I wanted to. No, not hug. Put two truths next to each other and see how they live. The remaining weeks before departure were short and clear. We continued our experiment. Bookstores, markets, cinemas, close but not in arms. The scale sometimes dropped to 4, after Mom's, "Are you sure you're happy?" And we took a break. Sometimes it rose to 8, after long walks and conversations that formed a real bridge. Once we ate soup in a small dining room that smelled of dill and a fresh rag, and he suddenly laughed at some stupid phrase of mine, so loudly that everyone turned to look at us, and I caught myself in a sudden, light, bird-like joy. I love to do good to this person with words. Not with my body, with words. And this is also love, just of a different configuration. The day before his departure, we met near that same cinema with the neon letters E that were fading in and out again. I took a glass one out of my bag, put it in my palm, and felt its weight. He looked at it and nodded. Take care of the letters, take care of the ribbons, I replied, and we both smiled. I want to ask you something, he said. Not about waiting and promising. About a ritual. When I leave, let's write to each other on Tuesdays, one short note each. What we saw, not as an obligation, but as a postcard. You can remain silent, you can send one punctuation mark, but Tuesday, we'll keep it. Let's do it, I agreed. And can I have more? If you suddenly want to, tell me about your network. How do you build it there without me? I'm interested, not to control, but to understand what kind of person you are. I will. He nodded. When he left, the apartment became a little freer and a little emptier, but not as I feared. No melancholy settled there. Air settled there. On Tuesdays, we exchanged notes. He sent photos of the corners of old books, like others send selfies. Funny phrases from ads, door signs sometimes, a drawing of a letter on a fogged glass. Once every couple of weeks, we called each other, and the conversation did not include, "When will you come back?" It was, "How do you breathe, and what is the scale?" Mom sent my aunt's address and asked for a postcard. If you're near the water, where the bend is, I bought a postcard in that very city in advance and sent it to her, attaching a note. I'm happy not because I'm like everyone else, but because I'm like me. I love your PS. The letter E is with me. Mom replied 2 days later. Sorry that I wanted to fix you. I'm teaching myself to love without fix it. Thank you for the water, beautiful. And for the first time, I read a text message from her without shrugging my shoulders. When Ilya returned, the street already smelled of burning leaves. We met near my house, like two people who had no outstanding accounts. He brought me a paperweight in the form of a shard of glass. Not a letter, not a symbol, just a piece that refracted the light so that little rainbows settled on my table. We sat down on a bench. I said, "The scale is 7. Me too, he smiled. We could have given it meaning, or we could have given it no meaning. We chose the latter. We just watched the janitor pull the cart with the broom behind him, and the leaves whispered to his steps. Tell me honestly, I asked, aren't you offended by never? If never were a lie, he replied, it would be a shame, but this is the shore. I know how to live by the water, and if I want to jump, it will be my choice, but for now, I'm fine standing. I nodded. Somewhere at the level of the ribs, it became inexplicably calm. I thought that all this is not a romantic comedy, not the right ending, not now she's changed. This is my life, in which I learned to hear the wave in advance and not consider myself broken. And I also realized that we can be different. Sometimes we are people who stand at a distance of one letter, but this distance is filled with meaning. In the evening, before going to bed, I took out a notebook with the phrase, "Not dying from emotion is also a skill," and added next to it, "And not living someone else's is also." I put a glass E next to it, heavy, honest. It was raining outside, and the drops were tasting the windowsill. I closed my eyes, counted to 4, a habitual check of the scale, and smiled. Somewhere in the city, Ilya was probably doing the same, not counting, but simply breathing. I don't know what the end game of this is, and maybe this is my end of the story. I stop looking for an ending based on someone else's patterns. I have my own structure. The introduction was about nausea from a kiss. The development is about agreements and letters. The climax is about never, and about him remaining sitting on the bench at the same distance. The denouement is this: I fall asleep in my own bed with the feeling that the word is still readable, even if one letter goes out and then lights up, even if it doesn't light up at all, even if this word is I beginning of form, end of form.